Yo, it's Missy, aka Angel, aka Mom. Alright, so before we get started, like, share, and subscribe. So, this video is going to be me explaining what happened to Jordan at birth, why Jordan has cerebral palsy. So, first and foremost, Jordan is my fourth child, my second son, and he has spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. He was born with a birth injury. That's how all of this started, which is called HIE, which means hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. So, okay, I'll jump right in. All right, so my pregnancy with Jordan was completely normal. There was not supposed to be any issues. The only thing that was not normal about it was I had a tubal after baby number 3, my first son. Oh, excuse me. So, after my third son, I did not want any more children. After my third child, I did not want any more children. I had 2 girls and a boy, and I was like, well, I always wanted to have my own son. I got my son, now I'm good. Whole nother story on why the doctor that delivered my oldest son didn't do it. Ended up going to another doctor. And, I'm sorry, y'all. So, my tubal was done laparoscopically. Sorry, the phone going dead. Yeah. So, it didn't work. How we know it didn't work? Because I ended up pregnant. I got my surgery September 2017 and conceived the first week in November. But the pregnancy was totally normal. There was not supposed to be anything wrong with him. The first sign of trouble for me was week 36, week 37. So with my other pregnancies, I had high blood pressure issues. Really bad with my oldest child. So, if you're a woman, you've had a baby, if you had these issues, you're kind of on watch for these issues with every child you have. So nothing had really reared its head, when I was pregnant with Jordan, but around week 36, week 37, went to the doctor. It was week 37. Yeah. Went to the doctor, and, they make you pee in a cup every time you're pregnant. Peed in the cup. And the nurse is like, oh, you have a little protein in your urine. If you've had issues, especially blood pressure issues with your child, everybody know protein in the urine is like one of the main signs. So I was like, okay. Took my blood pressure. They're like, your blood pressure is a little bit elevated, not a lot. Okay, that's number 2. Okay, so it's not high, but it's elevated, and you see protein in my urine. So those are like the 2 things. Get into the room, and she does the Doppler to check his heartbeat, and it's doing something funny. It's like kind of all over the place, which is not normal. So me being me, this is baby number 4 for me. So I know how this go. I have an auntie who's a nurse. Like I said, I wanted to be a nurse, so I was pretty medically inclined for a regular person. I knew it wasn't right. So they put me underneath the stress test. Doctor leaves out the room. I'm sitting in there, and I'm watching the monitor with his heart rate. So it will be like 150, 152, 120, 119, 95. It was like going to the most randomest numbers the whole time. It would never stay steady. So at this point, I'm like, I'm about to have a baby today. Which I was not against it, because at this point I was very tired of being pregnant. And I was very vocal about that with my doctor. Like, you could take me now. So at that point, I knew something was wrong, but it wasn't on me heavy. The doctor who I was seeing for Jordan, I had seen her with my oldest daughter. She didn't deliver because she was not on call the day that I had to have her, but I had seen her. When I found out I was pregnant with Jordan, we had a long conversation about, I was like, I left this practice because they didn't listen to me and this, that, and the third. I let her know, hey, once I have this baby, I need my tubes removed. I don't want any more children. And I was like, I have goals I'm trying to accomplish. Like, kids are expensive. And I told her, no matter what, when I have this baby, my tubes need to come out. And then also, I'm like, I just didn't want no oops, no uh-ohs, no nothing. So I was very vocal, like to the point where I was like brutally honest with this lady. Like, I don't want no more damn kids. Like, no more fucking kids. Like, that's the relationship I had with this doctor. So I kind of trusted her. Not kind of, I did trust her because I felt like, okay, she listened to me. You know how I feel about this. And I felt like she had my best interest at hand. So at this point, like I said, I'm in the room by myself. I see the numbers on the stress test. So I'm like, okay, I'm about to have to go to labor and delivery, which I was fine with because I remember my mama and my husband was making me have like a baby shower. And it wasn't nothing big, but it was something small. But at this point in my pregnancy, I was like, I don't want to do nothing. I just want to have this baby and go home. So she came back and I was like, I'm ready to go. And she was like, because I think it had kind of balanced out a little bit, but not a whole bunch. She should have still sent me to the hospital. So she's like, no, you're fine. You're fine. And I was like, you sure? Because I've been sitting here watching the whole time. It's been bouncing around. And she's like, no, yeah, because he leveled out. So hindsight is 2020. I probably should have left there and went to the ER. I shouldn't have trusted that, but one thing I'm working on with myself is I am not a doctor. I'm not a nurse. That wasn't my call. It was her call. But anywho, go home, and for the next week, because he was born the next week. So for that next week, I know he was moving and stuff, but I don't know how often. That following Friday, I never forget it. My husband started a new job, and he had got his uniforms from his new job, and I remember we was playing around, and I still got the pictures, and we were just laughing at him because he has a name on his uniform and stuff. It was like hilarious. So I remember we ate with the kids. I don't know, it was a good night. It was a good Friday night, and I went to sleep. And side note, I've never been into labor with any of my kids. I've always had to be induced. So yeah. So we're asleep in the middle of the night. I think at this point it's like about to be 2 a.m. I'm like feeling pain. The pain will not stop. So I'm like, I'm not in labor. I've never been in labor any of these kids. But it was so bad. I had my husband up and I was like, I am in pain. I was like, this shit hurt. He's like, do you need to go to the hospital? And I was like, man, I'm not gonna go to the hospital. They ain't gonna do nothing but send me back home, because that's what they love to do to you when you're pregnant. And it just wouldn't stop. And I guess he could see, because I can take pain. And I guess he could see, like, you in pain. You can take pain, but you're not taking pain right now. And he was like, we need to get up and go to the hospital. So boom, put all the kids in the car, dropped the kids off to my sister. And the hospital I was having him at was actually pretty far from my house. So the only thing I really remember after we dropped the kids off, or something that stuck out to me, was I felt like on the way to the hospital, I felt him shift inside of me. And then after that, I like didn't feel him really move anymore. But I wasn't thinking nothing of it, because I'm like, okay, if I am in labor, because I was still at this point having contractions, I'm like, if I am in labor, maybe he just went down there and, like, I don't know, just stopped moving. Who knows? So boom, we get to the hospital, go through triage or whatever. I'm like, hey, I think at the time I was like 38 weeks in like 3-4 days. And I'm like, I believe I'm having contractions. I was like, I've never went into labor on my own, but they won't stop. I'm in pain. So they was like, okay. So did the same thing they always do. Get you signed in to the hospital. It's not like you go directly to a room. By the time I got in the room, they was like, okay, there go your gown. Take your clothes off. Go leave a sample. I left a sample and came back and laid down, and they were coming to hook me up to the monitors. If you had a baby, you know that's the first thing they do when you're in L&D triage. And I don't remember ever looking at the machines. This part is foggy because it moved very fast. So they put the monitors on there, and it went so fast it was a blur. I know they were like, I don't even remember her calling people in there, but all of a sudden there was a rush of people in this triage room. And I remember they like, I wasn't stripped, but they made me get on all fours. You know, I don't have anything up under the gown. So they're like, we need you to turn over. We're trying to see if we can get a heartbeat a different way. So they did something. I'm trying to see, did they go? I don't know if they put something in me vaginally or something, but I had to flip over. And I guess that didn't work. And next thing you know, I didn't see my husband no more because he was in the triage room. I didn't see him anymore. It was just a room full of a bunch of people. And my doctor or somebody came in and was like, we have to rush you to the OR. You got to have this baby right now. So I'm like dead scared because I'm thinking I just went into, like, I'm going into labor, right? And like I said, I don't remember anyone telling me what the heart rate or anything was. I just know they tried to put that monitor on there, and whatever they seen, it was terrible. So at this point, I'm like boo-hoo crying. And at this point in my mind, I don't think nothing's wrong with my baby. I think I'm gonna die. I remember laying there and I asked God, I was like, well, God, if you take me, please take care of my kids. The whole time, never thought nothing was wrong with the baby. I'm like, you finna die. So I remember they were rushing me back. They were trying to get an IV because, of course, I wasn't gonna be able to get the epidural because they had to do it right then. And I'm a hard stick. And I don't know why I was such a super hard stick, but they thought they got the IV in, and we all thought it was in there, but it popped, it blew or something. And I'll never forget, I'm on the operating room table, and it was the anesthesiologist that was in there. And once the IV blew it, because it popped out my arm, I don't know how that happened because I don't even think I was moving. I just know I was boohoo crying. So it popped out my arm, and I just remember him saying, "What the fuck? We need to get an IV in her now." And that's the last thing I remember from the OR. Because I guess they ended up getting it in there, got the medicine, they put me to sleep. So when I came to, I woke up, I was like, I knew I made it. And the first person I seen was, I think it was my mama. No, it might have been my husband. I don't remember which one came first, but one of them was in there. I want to say it was my husband. And he was looking like, if anybody know him, he's not one that's lost for words ever. And he looked really somber, but at the same time, I'm like, they just put me to sleep. I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know up from down. And he was like, yeah, everything's fine. They just gonna take him and check on him. And I'm like, okay. Still not thinking nothing wrong. And I think he was first because I think he was like, they don't allow that many people back here, so I'm gonna let your mama come back. So I was like, cool. So then my mom came back, and my mom looked like she seen a ghost, but I'm still not catching on. Like, my mom wasn't even there when I went to labor, so I know all this had to happen. Like, my husband had to call her. I'm still not catching on that nothing is like really serious, but she just seen a ghost. She just looks like but my mama is like the type of person that can overreact about anything, so I'm not thinking that. I'm like, okay, whatever. She looked terrible, but she was like, they gotta take him downtown to the NICU. They just want to check on. They gave me some excuse, so I'm like, okay. Still not getting why everybody looking like that. So I remember her begging the nurse, like literally begging, please let us see him, please let us see him, please. And I'm like, yeah, I want to see my baby. But I'm not understanding why, like, she's begging. I'm not understanding what's behind her begging to let me see him. So they brought him in, and he was in like the little incubator that they put babies in to go to the NICU. He was regular size. Nothing about his physical appearance looked crazy at that point. He just was in the incubator. So, and I have a picture. So I remember I got enough strength to like reach out and grab his little finger. And it was like, we gotta go. And they whisked him away. So I'm like, okay. Still not thinking something is really wrong. I get in my room. My mama and my husband, they up there, and it was like, well, my husband's like, I'm gonna come back and check on you, but they need a parent at the hospital with him or whatever. And I'm like, cool, go check on the baby, I'll see you. Because we had 2 different hospitals. So my mom was still there looking somber. She stayed for a few minutes, and she was like, well, we're gonna go with him and make sure everything okay. Still not thinking none of it. I'm at the hospital all day in my room, and nobody really never told me nothing. I'm chilling. One of my friends at the time came up up to visit me. And she was kind of somber too. But she had just left her funeral that day. So still not catching on. I'm just like, she left her funeral. So I'm like, yeah, da-da-da. And while we're sitting there, because by this time it's shift changed, so night shift is back on. And a random nurse walked in and was like, hey, honey, just to let you know I'm praying for you. And I'm like, thank you. I'm just like, these some real nice people, they praying for me. And she was like, I'm praying for you. And I'm like, appreciate it. And she was like, yeah, we had 2 babies cold last night. So I'm like, huh? Because at this point, I don't know my baby didn't code it. And I was like, oh, okay. But it still didn't hit me. I know what cold mean, but it still didn't hit me. I'm like, okay, thank you. So I'm like, all right. And then my friend don't say nothing. So I'm just like, okay, cool. So my husband get back to the hospital. And it's my friend, my husband, and me. My husband looks crazy. Still not thinking none of it. So finally he calls my aunt, who's a nurse. And he was like, she's going to explain to you what the doctor said. And I'm like, okay. Which to me is still not unusual because my husband's like not a medical person and my auntie is. So like she'll be able to explain it to me better. And I remember getting on the phone with my auntie and I was like, hey. And she was like, she asked me to please try to stay calm. She was like, because she's like, please try to stay calm because this is going to be really hard, or this is already hard for me to say, like something around it. And they proceeded to tell me that he coded at birth. And I know what code means. Code means you pretty much died and got to bring you back. And his brain, I think his brain started to swell. No, I'm sorry. He lost blood flow and oxygen to his brain. And then after that, I think I pretty much tuned out. I can't even give you word for word what that was. I just, after I heard that, I freaking lost it. I lost it. It was like a train ran into me. And it started making sense. Like when the nurse told me she was praying for me and stuff like that. And I was just like, this is why everybody been tiptoeing around me all day. Like, this is why even the nurses and stuff that were coming in, like, it was shocking to me. So, yeah. Can't remember the rest of that phone call. I don't. That's just one of them, like, traumatic moments where it takes your memory. That's one of those moments because I can't tell you. I can't tell you the rest of the conversation. I know she explained to me everything that was messed up with him, which was a whole bunch. I remember her telling me he's underneath a cooler. Because when you have a brain injury like that, I know with babies, they put you like, they cool you. Because they say like when they cool your body like that, like it helps to slow down the damage to the brain. So I'm like, what? So I knew it was serious. I knew it was like super serious because when I woke up that next morning, my other auntie and my grandma was walking in my hospital room. They live 6 hours away in Alabama. I knew it was serious. And my grandma said, I had to put my eyes on you. So at this point, like, they done told me that last night. I wake up and my grandma and my auntie walking in my hospital room. Don't even know they done left Alabama. I'm like, something really real is going on. So yeah. Then I ended up getting out of the hospital. And I remember they took me directly downtown to the NICU where he was at. And I was not prepared in the least bit because I remember I still had on a nightgown and like some sweats. And my mama kept yelling at me like, you need to put a jacket on. Because it was like a nightgown that had spaghetti straps. I ain't give a damn about none of that. I was trying to see my baby. And I wanted to walk. And they like, you just had an emergency C-section like 3 days ago. You cannot walk. So they had to wheel me. And I felt like they weren't wheeling me fast enough. They wheeled me and they signed me in. And they took me in that NICU. And just rolling through there. And you see all them babies in the little incubators. And that was already tearing me up. But when they rolled me to my baby, he did not look the same. He didn't look the same from when I reached my hand out and I touched him before they let him go. He had swole so bad. He looked like a sumo wrestler. It didn't even look like the same child. And I freaking lost it. When I say I lost it, I lost it. I could not control myself. They had to wheel me back out the NICU. And I sat in that hallway of that hospital and I bawled so loud. And I'm the type of person, I don't like to show emotion to nobody. But at this point, I did not care. I was in that hallway crying my heart out. And I just kept telling, they called one of my cousins and her baby was premature. So she had went through, the NICU experience. And they called her to try to talk me off the ledge because, she, understood it. The NICU experience, but to me, that little incubator looked like a little casket. And then the fact that he didn't look the same, I could not do it. I don't know how long I stood out there crying. It felt like forever. So by the time I was done crying, I went back in there, and I think the neurologist had round it, and they were telling me, it's called HIE, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. And the main thing that I just kept hearing them say was, we don't know. So we don't know what this means for him going forward because, he can recover. He, could not recover as well. There was no certainty at this point. And I mean, it's neither their fault nor anybody's fault because you really don't know when they have these brain injuries. They just treat what they see. So his kidneys had took a big hit from the coating. So they had to have him on like blood pressure medicine. His brain, he was swole. He was so swole. Pretty much everything. Everything to the brunt. He was in the NICU for 23 days. I really thought he should have stayed longer. I really did. But they're like, no, he's fine to go home. But I really thought he should have stayed longer. Even to this day, almost 4 years later, I still think he should have stayed longer. He was on a ventilator too. So that's, who want to see that? He was on a ventilator. He was not breathing for himself the first time I seen him. He was not. He was on the vent for 13 days. Yeah, for 13 days. Before they were able to take him off. So, who want to see that? Nobody wants to see that. It took me like freaking 2 years to even look at the pictures without crying. Because, what? First off, it brings you back to a very dark place. Second, to see your child like that. Like, in the beginning, I didn't want nobody to post no picture of him. Like, in that hospital. And I'm not like a super old police about my child, but I don't know what it was in that beginning. I didn't want nobody to post no picture of him. I don't know. My headspace, I can't explain to you. And a lot of stuff is just like, it's blurry because that was a highly traumatic part of my life. Highly. And even still at that point, I had a lot of hope. In my head, I thought, okay, this is just going to mean he's going to be slower to do things. He's going to be slower to learn his ABCs. He may be a grade or two behind. This is where my mind is. I'm not thinking anything permanently. I'm thinking learning disorder type of thing. I'm thinking slightly intellectually disabled, maybe. That's as far as my brain is taking it for the future for him. So I will say the day before, the day before he was to go home, at this point, he was like in the little step down of the NICU. So it's still the NICU, but it wasn't as serious. So I was putting a little outfit on him, and I noticed his head seemed dented. Like, it seemed like Like, okay, this is your head, but it felt like it was like a drop off or something. So this time I'm like, well, he did have, because when they were doing the cooling and stuff, he had this thing on his head. He had this thing on his head. So I'm like, he a baby, so you have to shape their heads and stuff anyway. And then like their skulls aren't, formed all the way. So I'm thinking just nothing to worry about. Went home and I felt like it kept getting worse. And I was like, why is it like my baby's head is dented? They sent me to just a regular pediatrician. So he went to the same pediatrician that all the rest of my kids went to. And I remember like the first appointment, he seen his head and I brought it up and he was like, I think it's craniosynostosis. And he was like, I'm gonna send you to see a neurosurgeon. And I'm like, cool. And he was like, they may have to do surgery. So that sounds bad, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, it's gonna fix it. That way my baby head and I didn't. We go and we get MRIs done. They send us to a neurosurgeon. First appointment to neurosurgery. It's the brain. Show you all the damage. It looks terrible. And that doesn't make me feel any better because I'm like, what does this mean? And still nobody is telling me. They're just like, you don't know. You gotta give time brain to repair itself or blah, 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 blah. You don't know. So you still in limbo. So they were like, it's not craniosynostosis though. It's microcephaly. So I'm like, what? So they were like, his brain is really not gonna grow. So I'm like, what? So at the time, I'm looking from a vanity standpoint. I'm like, I need you to fix it. I can't have my son head dented. Like, you can't fix this. He can't wear a helmet. You can't do surgery. And they're like, no, it's not that. It's microcephaly. So when I started looking at microcephaly, that made me feel even worse. And I'm just like, God, what? Cool, whatever. He started deteriorating at about, he's born in July, the end of July. He started deteriorating around 2.5, 3 months. And it got to the point where he wasn't eating. I would try to feed him. He wouldn't eat. And I just was like, what is wrong with this baby? He would cry and scream. And it wasn't a regular, like, colicky baby. It was like there was no stopping it. Something was wrong. So, my phone almost went dead. So, honestly and truly, I do not remember how we ended up going to see. And here we have something called a medically complex clinic. Sorry. So we ended up going with them because he was supposed to be seeing them the whole time. He really wasn't supposed to be seeing a regular doctor. Matter of fact, I think it was his regular doctor was like, he needs to go see them because my kid's doctor is a great doctor. And I'll never forget our first appointment to go to the medically complex doctor. He was having one of those spells where he just would not stop crying. Like, the doctor could not examine him. She said, I have to send you across the street. The hospital's across the street. I'm like, what? So, and I let her know, he hasn't been eating. He was like way small, eating and lost so much weight. Long story short, that hospital stay lasted for almost 3 weeks. We got out of the hospital on Thanksgiving of that year. During that hospital visit, we learned he had been having something called neurological storms. So we didn't have him hooked up to any monitors, but in the hospital when he would do those crying and screaming fits, his heart rate would be through the roof. I mean, unbelievable numbers. His blood pressure would be through the roof. And he wasn't feeding. He wasn't taking anything. They came in, had a conversation with me. It was like a feeding tube. But the doctor that came in and had the conversation with me, he was saying that like, oh, a maybe. He wasn't saying like your baby not eating, he need a feeding tube. So at the time I was like, hell no. He gonna eat. We'll take him to therapy. No, my baby not getting no feeding tube. So, okay, next day, they come back again, and this doctor is like, he need a feeding tube. And I'm like, well, the doctor yesterday made it seem like it was an option. Like, he can't do, very intense feeding therapy. He was like, this baby has lost this amount of weight because the storming is stopping him from eating. He need a feeding tube. He's losing so much weight. When I tell y'all that was the hardest decision of my life when my baby got a feeding tube. But I had to do it because he really wasn't eating. I knew he wasn't eating. And I think it was the day he got the feeding tube put in, because we did meet one doctor who was a godsend. And she came in and she sat down and was talking to me. And I was like, what does all of this mean? Like, what's going on? Nobody sat down and y'all gotta excuse me. Oh, this is hard to keep playing. So nobody had like really sat down and just like had a conversation with me to like, even give me ideas of where any of this was going. And she was like, he will likely never walk or never talk. So I'm like, what? They told me, it can go either way, here or there. And she told me the brain injury that your son had at birth. She said the type of injury we compare it to kind of like drowning victims, like kids who are older and drown. It's like that. So when he got out the NICU, he was fine. But they say this happens in kids that drown. So you may, get to a point where you're stable, but it takes like a few months before like the brain injury really sets into your brain. Because at one point he was drinking 6-ounce bottles, like within that first 3 months at home and everything. So that was the hardest part, because he was drinking out of a bottle. He was doing all of this. But at 3 months, that normal baby, that I didn't have that no more. And nobody explained to me that that was a possibility, that was going to happen. So she's explaining all this to me, and she's not being nasty or rude. Like, he ain't never going to do it. But she's like telling me, she being real with me. I'm a realist. And I appreciated that. Because nobody told me that. Nobody told me, oh, the type of injury he has. Oh, you going to go home and things going to seem normal. But no, it's going to go balls to the wall after a couple months. So that sank me into a deeper depression, because at this point I'm like, my baby ain't going to walk or talk. He's not going to walk or talk. What? This isn't the learning your ABCs slower. Like, what? So, get the feeding tube. I didn't even want to look at his stomach. When I tell you, like, that first day, I didn't even want to look at his stomach. I didn't want to believe it was real. I was like, this is not real. But it was real. I'm going to come back for part 2.